Welcome to part 2 of my studio session prep videos. I hope you enjoyed part 1. In this part we're going to take a look around my studio and see how I've got everything set up. So to give you an idea of the space that I'm working with, the size of the studio, I'm filming this on my GoPro style camera just because my regular camera doesn't have a wide enough angle lens to fully capture the entire space of each room. But this is my control room. So I have my desk here, my setup for my camera stuff, A10 Mini and my MacBook, amp heads here, sofa for the clients to sit on. A bit messy in here at the moment, but yeah, you get the idea. And then we go through to the live room where we've got the drum kit, upright piano, my recent acquisition, this pump organ, which is really cool. It's from the early 1900s, so it's about 115 years old, I think. Needs a little bit of work. Yeah, the main live room space is really quite small. And then we go through to the booth. I'll turn on the light. And this is the booth here. So again, it's very small. In total, this studio is about 500 square foot. I think it's actually 450 square foot, and we've got my little kitchenette area with also kind of workshop area where I have all my tools and then my guitars here. But yeah, not a lot of room to work with, maximizing on every inch of the space here. You can see up here all my ceiling treatment. My main entryway area, which is where basically I have all my storage. I've got a filing cabinet with cables and all my microphones here, other bits and bobs, mic stands and a bunch of spare OSB at the moment. Again, this is kind of a realistic view of your typical smaller project studio and the kind of compromises you have to make and how you can make that work. So drum wise, I'm going to walk you through what I've got going on. Let's start with the kick mics. As you can see here, I've got my 3 kick mics. I've got the Sennheiser E901, so this guy inside the kick drum, just sitting on some pillows as a bit of dampening inside the drum. I've got my SEV kick mic as my kick out mic, my sub kick mic, which if you don't know, a sub kick is basically a speaker working in reverse. You can look it up if you want to learn more about that and how you can make your own. They're super easy to make. All you need is a speaker basically and some XLR cable and an XLR connector. I try to make sure that these 2 mics, the sub kick mic and kick out mic, the capsules are in line with each other because that means that they're going to be in phase. Of course, there is the timing difference because the kick-in mic is further inside the drum. There's going to be a timing difference between those 3. They don't need to be perfectly in alignment. There being a bit of a timing difference between mics is generally fine as long as the phase is correct. Just up here is my AKG C414 set to cardioid, and as you can see, the front of the capsule, the front of the mic, is facing away from the drum kit. So as I mentioned earlier, this is just to try and get a bit of a bigger room sound because the mic is as close as it can be to the kit, but it's facing away from the drum kit. It's capturing almost the most of the room as possible and the least amount of the direct sound of the kit as possible, or at least that's kind of the idea of it. So yeah, we'll see how it works in this particular session. Over here is my hi-hat mic, the SM7B. I keep the windshield on, the towel draped on the mic stand here. I've tried to make this trick work before, but the idea is that you drape a towel in between the hi-hat mic and the snare just to kind of separate the hi-hat if you're having trouble with hi-hat bleed into your snare mic or vice versa. Putting a towel, draping it across the mic stand and putting it in between the hi-hat and the snare can help mitigate that. I find most of the time, most drummers I'm working with, the hi-hat itself is too close to the snare drum and there's no way I can really position a stand with a towel in between, but I've got it there ready in case, depending on how the drummer for this session has the kit set up, I might be able to make that work. My tom mic, so I have a clip-on SE V-drum mic, whatever it's called, clipped directly onto the rack tom. People will sort of say different things about this, that when you're recording you shouldn't necessarily have mics clipped directly onto the shells of the drums. I've never had too much of an issue with it. The idea basically is that you might sort of be getting unwanted resonance, and then the added weight of the mic clamped onto the shell can actually affect the tone of the drum. I have found that with my floor tom. So I have another of the SE mics on the floor tom. This SE mic is on a stand on the floor tom. The last session I did, I had this clipped on to the floor tom. There was a bit of a kind of strange vibration that I could hear. In the context of the mix, yeah, it wasn't an issue. On the rack tom, I don't find it to be an issue having the mic clipped on directly to the shell, and it just saves setting up an extra stand, and I have a limited amount of mic stands as well. I never seem to have enough mic stands. I keep buying more, and yet I never seem to have quite enough. On the snare top, I've got the SEV7X. You can see here I've got a little bit of foam kind of wrapped around the near the front of the mic. That is just to try and eliminate a bit of hi-hat bleed. To be honest, I've never really known how much of a difference this makes. Doing this, I used to do this on my tom mics as well, and arguably this might actually affect the response of the mic a bit. Putting foam near it, I'd try not to have it kind of too close to the capsule. Set it back a bit further back, because it might actually change the actual response of the mic, which you don't really want. Over here you can see my tin can mic, so that is mounted underneath my patch panel here and is pointed sort of towards the drum kit behind the drum throne, and I just leave that set there all the time. So up next I have my overhead mics, a pair of the Bifaley 414 mics. I'm excited to hear what these are like as drum overheads. I've not used these mics yet in a recording session. I've only tested them out on my voice, but I feel like they're going to sound good as drum overheads. Hopefully I'm not wrong. When I have a space pair like this, I like to set the mics up so that they're kind of sitting over my toms. So one overhead is kind of sat over my rack toms or rack tom, and the other is set over my floor tom. And I find this, just for me, works nicely. It gives a nice image of the kit. It just kind of softens cymbals a bit. Cymbals always just get everywhere, and if you're not careful they can end up just harsh sounding or overly top-endy. So yeah, I like my overheads kind of placed over the toms, and that works for me. One thing you want to make sure is that your overheads are of equal distance to your snare drum. That's the easiest way to get the nicest sounding stereo image, because the snare, you kind of want that like bang dead center, at least for most modern mixes. You want your kick and snare dead central, so if you line things up to your snare drum, you're going to get a great stereo image. And then also, if they're equal distance from the snare, it's going to make sure that they are both picking up the drum kit at the same time, so you're not going to have any kind of phase issues. My overhead mics are suspended from boom arms from the ceiling, or they're actually suspended from my ceiling cloud panels. I like it in that this space is small and it gets stands off the floor, which just makes the setup kind of cleaner. But I have found that, I don't know, I'd like to find a better way of doing this. Not necessarily going back to floor stands, although I might do, but I just find these are pretty cumbersome if you need to change anything with the positioning. For one, I have to get up a step ladder most of the time to adjust them. I find them a bit of a pain just getting the right position, and then in terms of checking phase and making sure that they're properly aligned to the snare, it can be a bit of a faff, whereas it's much easier if you've got stands on the floor to adjust them quickly. So that's something I want to kind of figure out, but for now I'm staying with these ceiling mounted overhead boom arms behind these doors. So during the session these doors will be closed. This door is to the control room, this door is to the main entryway of the studio. I've got this panel here, fabric covered on the front, and it's got rock wool inside it. The other side is OSB. This table, which I set up when I want to do podcasts, this is kind of leaning at the back here. You can see I have this Aston Spirit mic set up here. So this sits behind this gobo panel, and directly behind it is tabletop. The mic is set to Omni. Basically the idea is that it's sat between two reflective surfaces. Sound is going to kind of get trapped and sort of bounce around in this corner and create a bit of a bigger, livelier sound. And here I have the tape recorder, the dictaphone. This will just plug into a DI box. It usually sits on top of the upright piano somewhere. This just picks up the sound of the drum kit in the room, adds some interesting character into the drum mix. This is one of my main patch panels in the main live room. Everything sort of runs to the main patch panel in the control room by default. I've got particular lines hooked up to certain preamps. I've also got headphone output, and headphones sit on the side there on that little hook ready for the drummer. There's an iPad here for their headphone monitoring, so they can actually control their own headphone mixes through RME Total Mix Effects remote. And their talkback mic here, which is actually on this this stand I created out of an old lampshade and one of those cheap boom arms, desk boom arms that you get off eBay in places. Because of the boom arm, they can sort of pull it in when they want it, but fold it out of the way when they don't. I have this little sub box as well. Try and keep things a little tidier cabling wise, not that it's that tidy at the moment, but my main drum lines go into that, into the main patch panel. Over here I have as well a second patch panel for lines running pretty much the other side of the room. In hindsight, after I built this room, I would have put this elsewhere because the two patch panels are literally kind of either side of the same end of the room. I probably would have put this the other end of the room. The idea is that I don't have cables trailing everywhere, but this one actually, it's right near the doorway to the kitchen as well. So if I have any cables running along, yeah, they're right in the way of the doorway. So hindsight, you know, I would have wired that up a little differently, but it's fine the way it is. You can see, as well as mic lines, I've also got 4 extra headphone lines. In total, I've got 7 headphone lines. To be honest, it's overkill for what I'm doing most of the time. I'm never using more than 1 headphone output at a time, maximum 2. But yeah, I have those available if I need them. So you can see here in the toilet, I've got this mic set up. When I first bought these, the guy was just selling them on Gearspace. I think he had a website by that point. Now it's kind of grown in scope, but essentially he makes these microphones, houses them in used shotgun shells, so quite cool. These particular ones are Omni, so they're quite good for room mics. I think these mics are just going to be throwaway mics for this session, but we'll see. So it's just clamped onto that piping with one of the gravity clamps. They're pretty cool clamps, quite inexpensive. I'd recommend them. I've had it pointed before, sort of out towards the main live room. I've had it pointed away from the live room before, at the wall. I'm going to point it up to the ceiling for this one and just see what happens. I'm just treating it as a throwaway mic. Same for in the entryway here. I've had it pointed out towards the room, I think down towards the floor before. I'm going to have it pointed out towards the outside, the very front of the building. I'm going to see what that sounds like. It's all about just experimenting with this stuff, really. One thing that I've been doing quite a lot lately with my kick drum is I have these 2 little gobos that I built, and I'll essentially build a kick drum tunnel out of these. And what that does is it kind of just helps create a really nice, beefy, chunky kind of kick sound. So I do this a lot, and also it helps isolate the drum mics from the rest of the drum kit as well, so helps eliminate a bit of bleed, which again is helpful. So I'll have them arranged something like this, and then I actually have this mat, which I call Damon, Matt Damon. I place this guy over the top like this, and then that kind of creates my kick tunnel. This mat I actually got in Sweden on tour from IKEA. These are standing mats, and they're really useful when you're stood on your feet for a long time at front of house mixing a show live. They just take a lot of the weight off your feet. Quite expensive. I think this was like £45 or something, but totally worth it. And when you work that cost out per show, when you're on a month-long tour, it's actually quite cost effective. But in the studio, this has now become the top piece for my my drum tunnel. I've seen people use all sorts of things like mic stands and just draping blankets over them. Anything really that's going to create a bit of a tunnel. In the control room here, next to the desk and under this side desk, underneath, built into one of the corner traps in the control room, is this main XLR patch bay. So my TRS patch bay's in the rack over here, and that is for patching from any of the outputs. It starts with the outputs for most of my mic preamps. Where the inputs to the mic preamps are going, I go from the tie lines from either the main live room or the booth, and then it comes out of this patch panel here. These looms patched into it, they go out into my my preamps. Normally I have my Warm Audio 500 series on snare top in the main live room, so that goes to that patch panel there. But if I want to repatch that to a line in the vocal amp booth, then I can repatch this on here. Yeah, it is a nightmare because I have to kind of crawl under here. It looks pretty stupid whilst I'm in the middle of the session. So someday I'm going to do something about that. All of this, this here is going to change anyway at some point. I'm planning to pick up a few synths at some point, so I think I'll build more of a synth rack here or something, at which point that panel will be more accessible, but I might move where it is anyway. But for now, I'm just kind of leaving it as it is until I've been here a bit longer. But one thing I've learned is that you can rush into things too much. Running a studio, there's always going to be stuff forever changing, but that's where I can sort of patch any of my tie lines where they're going to in the main live rooms. Yeah, this is my little vocal booth. Quite hard to film in here because it's pretty small, but this is where my vocal mic is. So it's normally where I track vocals in here, even though I'm not a big fan of vocal booths in general. But I found the whole of this studio space is so dead anyway, it kind of doesn't really matter whether I track vocals in here or in the main live room, unless I want to do like a room mic for vocals or something. They're fine in here. So vocal station is kind of always ready to go. Got a few extra pop shields here, headphones, they're ready, an iPad for the RME app so the singer can control their own headphone mix. Guitar amps here, some extra storage. Leslie cabinet that I made out of an old broken Hammond organ. I've got various combos and cabs, and then I have different tie lines which go to my heads, my amp heads in the control room, so I can patch in out of all my lines from my different cabs. And then I have two main patch points where I can patch in and then send those signals out to another panel in the control room and patch things into my amp heads. Probably mic up one of these cabs kind of ready to go. I have my main, you won't really be able to see it, but my main patch panel is actually underneath here. That's where I patch in the booth. Again, in hindsight, I maybe would have put it somewhere better. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. I think I just thought it'd be nice to kind of have it out of the way, and that way I could keep cable runs neat, but it's actually just annoying because I have to move this chair out of the way every time. But you know, you live and learn. Capturing guitar and bass tones, scratch tracks initially, but we may end up using those actual takes and then reamping or whatever. Hot tone, Ampero 2 stomp. I think it'll more just be for scratch tracks rather than actual recording tones. So that's going to be for guitar, which is just going to go line out from the Ampero. I have all my guitar pedals here, which all runs through this unbalanced patch bay, and I can sort of create any pedal chain I want. This is great when tracking guitar. I've got DI in and through and reamp out. So on my boards, ABY split, if I want to send guitars out to 2 amps at the same time, which is sometimes useful, but also here, kind of hidden at the back, this is my reamp box. This is an Orchard Electronics reamp box, great reamp box, very affordable. Radial, passive DI box, so bass is going to be patched through this. And I also have this Little Labs, quite unfortunately named Little Labs STD. There's a box for the other end, but essentially you plug this instrument cable end into your guitar, and then this essentially allows you to extend guitar signals over XLR balance lines. So I can run guitar through the tie lines in my studio, out the other end to the little box that you have. That sits the other end, and then you go guitar cable out of that box into a guitar amp. So that's a great way if I want to have the player sat here in the control room and then send the guitar signal out if I'm going out to a combo or something in the live room or in the booth. Otherwise I can go split out to one of my heads here, my main head being the Marshall JCM 900, so I can dial in tones here without needing to do that in the booth, which is annoying sometimes with combos if you've got your face right in front of a loud guitar amp trying to dial in tones. And also it's helpful to be able to dial in the tones hearing what the mic is actually picking up. I think that's about it for my session prep today. Miking up acoustic guitar and stuff like that. I'm going to be repurposing some of the microphones that are on the drum kit anyway, so I'll have to sort of set that up on the fly on the day, and I just don't have the space really to set that up ready, so we'll set that up as and when we need to record it, and it's easier to do anyway when you've actually got the player sat there with their instrument. I might set some mics up ready for guitar cab, piano. I'm having that tuned before the session anyway, so there's no point setting up mics. I'll take the overhead mics for 414s. I'll use those, I think, along with my SE pencil condensers, I said. Ideally with stuff like that where, you know, when it's just a couple of mics, like miking up guitar cabs and stuff, that's not so bad. But stuff like the piano, I'd love to have some sort of mic configuration where I could have that mic'd up all the time, at the very least with close mics. I do have enough mics to do that, just I'm not sure if it's the mics that I actually want on the piano, and I'd like to come up with some sort of mounting system similar to as I've done with the drum overheads, so that I've not got two big mic stands in front of the piano. So I want to come up with some sort of mounting system for that. Distant mics for the piano, if I have those set up all the time, they'd just be constantly in the way. This is what it's like when you're working with a small space like this. I hope this has been useful to you guys. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and if you'd like similar content to this. Give the video a like if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel, that always helps me out. And I'll see you guys again in the next one.